Welcome to Soundbreaker. I'm your host, Bob Shammy, and we're about to break the silence. Join me as we go behind the scenes and meet some of the most influential names in the music industry. Get ready for remarkable success stories that break the norms and defy the odds. From dreams to success, from challenges to victory. An exclusive backstage pass into the lives of music trailblazers as they create their own path to success. This is Soundbreaker. Welcome to Soundbreaker. On today's episode, we're talking to Loren Chaidez, who is a groundbreaker in the music industry and a legend in promotion, Billboard promotion. Thanks for joining us, Loren. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself before we dive into it, just a little bit?
Okay, Bob, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is such a treat.
Pleasure to have you.
I'll tell you. I'm enjoying doing this, and thanks for having me on your podcast today. I most recently, within the music business, worked as an independent record promoter handling national dance music promotion for, I would say, almost every label that's out there. I had my own independent career for 35 or 36 years. That's a long time. Promoted a lot of records. And it was a lot of fun. My responsibilities were hyping brand new records to DJs around the country, and then ultimately getting records onto the charts in Billboard magazine on the dance chart. And we'll talk more about that in detail. That's the base of what I did in the industry.
I mean, you went through eras, 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, each one, a lot to talk about. It's going to be fun. So, Loren, can we go back a bit to the past and say, maybe your childhood, how did it all started? Like, what was drive your passion? This is what you want to do, being in the music industry. If you could take us back.
I don't know if I really knew I wanted to be in the music industry at a young age. I loved music. At an early age, I really loved listening to classical music. And then throughout high school, I worked in a record store in Westchester County, New York. For 8 years, I was working there, all through high school and all through college. And
I would assume vinyl.
It was all vinyl cassettes and 45s. That's all there was.
Oh my God,
then.
45s.
This is from 1971 until 1978, and it gave me a chance to really feel what vinyl was all about. I think the vinyl bug bit me really early. I was only a young teenager at the time. But that was my very, very early involvement with music and records. And I used to stock music for the record store that I worked at, really loved it, learned about distributing labels and things like that at a very young age. So it all was just beginning to make sense for me there when I started actually working in that record store. Then, after I graduated,
was that during was that during the disco era?
No. This is before the disco era. This is from 1971 until 1978. That's when I worked at this record store. So disco was coming in at the end of that. I was myself listening to a lot of rock and roll. I was listening to Mata Hoople, Slade, David Bowie, groups like that when I worked at this record store. But I saw records come in that were disco records, but wasn't really making any sense of them yet. I think I hadn't crossed into that field just yet. So after I graduated from college, which was in 77, just months after, I got a call from somebody. It was a classmate who had graduated just the year before me. And this person said that they were leaving their job at Columbia Records and would I be interested in taking this? It was an entry-level position, but they asked me if I was interested in taking the job. And of course I said yes. I had no idea what they were talking about, but it meant for me, hey, this means now traveling into New York City, commuting, and getting my life started in the music business. And I learned a lot very quickly, and things happened very quickly. And who knew that this was going to be my era, my area? I thought I might be a music teacher or something like that, but it turned out that I was a professional in the music business after all that.
What did you do in Colombia? Everything?
At Columbia Records, I worked in the publicity department. So I hadn't broken into, this is PR. It's all press. It's working with all the newspapers and Rolling Stone magazine and Cream magazine and
all the publications
publications around the country. I wasn't into promotion yet. That came later on when I went to Polygram, which was then Universal Music. So that's when I broke into promotion and then eventually dance music.
So you learned about vinyl distribution and record labels and sounds and all of that at the record store. Then you transferred to Colombia, and that's when you learned about PR, which is a big thing. Obviously, it's part of promotion.
And also working at Columbia Records was just such an amazing part of my life. I got to learn very quickly.
Who do you work? You work with any big Colombia? You work with any of the big artists?
Oh, at Columbia at the time? Yeah. I mean, there was Elvis Costello was a new artist, and I was lucky enough to be able to work with him. Bruce Springsteen. There were a lot of established artists. Billy Joel had already had several albums out, but I was lucky enough to be able to work with him there. And then, there were Santana and Paul Simon.
Wow.
And these are all artists that were already established, but there were a lot of new artists like Cheryl Lynn that were coming, at that point. So
at that time,
and that was my first taste, I think, of getting into the dance music field. And by then, I was starting to go to clubs in New York City and all of that. So it all kind of tied in.
So you witnessed the era of Studio 54. You did witness it.
Oh, yeah.
That, man.
And 12 West, and I can't even think of all the clubs. There's so many of them.
For our listeners, this is what all happening in New York. For our listeners, so they know
where's these clubs
New
York City.
New York City, the Big Apple. Yes,
right.
Yes,
and I lived in New York City at that time.
Yes,
and of course, at that time I was going out to clubs 7 days a week. And it was everything from CBGB to the Limelight to the Roxy,
CBGB
to the Saint,
Lower East Side.
Roxy,
oh my God!
I went everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, that was just part of my life, and by then I was really getting into it and really enjoying.
So working in Colombia and all of that, it shaped your career and your experience in the music industry. How did that kind of turn out? Where from there, say, okay, I know what I want to do now.
Well, I realized that I was enjoying promotion. By this point, things had switched from publicity to promotion. And what was happening, though, I found. I was let go at Columbia Records along with hundreds of other people. I think.
How come?
At that point, well, a lot of the labels were downsizing. I think they had overhired in the 70s, and then in one day they just fired hundreds of people. And of course, I was a casualty at that point, which I wasn't too happy about. But I was able to pick up and get back up on my feet again. And before too long, I was working at Polygram Records, which was Mercury, Polydor, and Casablanca. And the same thing happened there. I was let go at that label for the same reason.
Wow.
So I was starting to get frustrated. I wanted to be in the music business, but I didn't want to then go from label to label to label. And I saw this was happening to other people too. They would go
for Polygram. What did you do? Promotion, or you did
I was
PR,
doing
publicity?
promotion there, right? Promotion there, and then eventually headed up the dance promotion department. So that was my full introduction into the dance music business. That was
And
about
promotion.
1980,
Yeah.
82 or so. But after leaving Polygram, and I noticed that there were other people moving from label to label to label. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have more stability in my life. So in
Yes.
'84, I decided to start my own company. And I started working as an independent, and it was a real challenge. It was not easy to get started. There were
Wow.
some other independents that were ahead of me by a couple of years with their experience, so I had to break in from the
You said what
ground.
year was it? You started
This
84?
was this was '84 that I started
Wow.
my own
This is when
independent.
I started in the business.
Yeah, yeah.
84, yes. That's when I started in the business. I
And,
formed Wacko Records actually in August of 84.
right, right.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes.
but it was something that I knew I wanted to do. So
Yeah.
I did it, and it took about a year and a half for me to really get in there. I had to prove myself. I had to start selling myself in terms of my abilities as a promoter, and
Yeah.
go to the labels one at a time. What was
Yeah.
interesting, and I think what made things a little bit different for me, is that many of the other independent promoters were working for the majors. They were working for Atlantic and Warner Brothers and
Yeah.
RCA,
Yeah.
Capitol and Columbia, and it
Yeah.
seems like they were almost not disregarding the independent labels, but they weren't as concerned with them. So that's when I
Uh,
went in and I figured, here are all these incredible independent labels that are out there. There was Bobcat Records, that was Bobby Orlando. There was Profile Records, that was
Profile. I remember Profile. They had a
right.
lot of hits also.
They had
Profile.
a
Yeah, I
lot of
remember
hits.
Profile. Yes.
So I decided, hey, I'll work for these independent labels, and
They
and
had
it
a lot
was
of
that.
freestyle records.
Yeah,
A
there
lot of
was
freestyle hits.
freestyle. There
Yeah.
was some
Profile.
hip hop hits. I mean, Run DMC
Yes.
was huge back then.
Yeah.
All that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You know what? I gotta correct something. It wasn't 84 when I started. 94. I'm sorry. It was 94. I was 10 years off. 10
okay,
years
okay.
off.
Where did those 10 years go? You
Still
misplaced them
grinding.
somehow,
I
right?
was trying to figure out still what I want to do, where I want to go. Yes. I was in New York. Um, you know, I want to get into the promotion, to Loren Chaidez promotion, which is, I would say you are a godsend to the independent labels. You really were. I mean, you worked every record I released. Every record. I cannot name one. You're the only one. The first record I say was promoted, excuse me, was introduced. I don't know if you know Ted Patterson.
Oh yeah.
And Ted Patterson, he's the first one who came and was working with me on the label, in my own label. And he ran the label and he said, hey, we need to do Billboard promotion.
Mhm.
And it was in 90, 94, 95, something, 95. And he's like, I know it was my first record was a Key of Life. And he introduced me to Larry. Was he the one was in charge of the Billboard charts and Billboard?
Larry Flick.
Larry Flick, yes, he was the
Larry
Billboard.
Flick.
He was in charge of Billboard
Yeah.
dance, club play, and the whole page. It was his thing.
The whole he wrote the article, and he put that
Yes,
chart together, and the chart may have
yes.
been a top 70 at that point. The last iteration of the
Was it
Billboard chart
70?
was, I think it was 70 positions. At first it was 100 records, then they cut it down to top 70, and then
Yeah,
eventually, and I don't know what year, they cut it down to a top 50.
yes,
But yeah, Larry Flick was in there at that time.
yes,
Yep.
yes.
And I worked very
You,
closely with him too.
we're gonna get into the independent promotion in a minute and more details in it. You can talk about whoever you want, the names and all of that. But I know you promoted hits like Rihanna and Katy Perry's and many others besides Katy and Rihanna. And I'm sure there's a list that you can give us. But can you highlight like which campaign really stood out in your career of the big artists, the major label artists that really stood out?
Well, it's interesting because Katy Perry, and
Yeah.
Rihanna, when I first started working with them, weren't massive artists like they are now. Rihanna wasn't a
Mm.
billionaire yet. She is now. So a lot of those artists, I was fortunate enough to start working with from the ground up. But
Yeah.
there were other more notable names that were just a few years later than that, like Swedish House Mafia. I began working with them at the very, very beginning, and Avicii and David Guetta. Now, David Guetta is a household name. Everybody knows who David Guetta
Avicii
is.
became
Yeah,
a legend in
yeah.
his, because he's the one who started the whole movement.
So,
Wow.
so those are some of the notable groups that I was fortunate enough to start working with from the ground up. And
Yes.
at the same time, there were some established
But that
artists,
was
but
in the 2000s, that's right. That was in the 2000s.
yeah, this is in
Avicii
the
and House. Yes.
2000s and
Yeah.
the 1990s. In the 90s, I was still working with a lot of independent labels. I
Yeah,
was
we're gonna go
working,
back to that.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I was working with Strictly Rhythm. I worked with Strictly Rhythm for 7 or 8 years, and they were a
I
great
feel like you
label to
had an
work with.
office there. Like for every
Yeah.
record came in, it was them, quality, manufacturing, and then Loren Chaidez, who went to you. A copy always went to you.
There was labels like Big Beat, which was Craig
Big Beat. I
Kalman's
remember
label,
Big Beat. Oh my
right?
God, I
And
forgot about
and
it.
of course,
Yes.
Craig Kalman went on to be the president of Atlantic Records, and I believe he still
Yes.
is. I mean, what a jump
Yes.
that was for him. But I really enjoyed working with him. I worked with Sleeping Bag Records and Arthur Baker's Criminal Records. I worked with Jelly Bean Records. These are all independent record labels that I worked with. I worked with you for years. So there was
Yes.
a lot, but it gave
Okay.
me a chance to really develop my style.
I mean, I still don't understand. I thought I knew it, but I really didn't. We're gonna go take it step by step. Let's say back in the day, I just wanted you to tell me something. I know it's funny. Like I remember every time you promoted a record, you used to say, "Bob, send me 2 copies." How many times you used to ask label to send you copies in the mail of vinyl because they were broken or whooped because of the
Yeah,
heat, or they put, by UPS, or the mail put more boxes on top of them, so the record is whooped and you cannot play it?
that
How many
happened.
times?
That happened. That
A
happened a
lot.
lot. And
A
of
lot.
course we were sending records, physical vinyl 12-inch singles to DJs all across the country, and many of them just
Yes.
never made it. So
Never
now
made it, broken.
broken, warped, from the heat or whatever.
Yes.
Now, when
Yeah.
when things became digital, and this is in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
it helped to a point. Although
Eliminate
what
all of that.
well, it eliminated that, but it put the pressure on me then to create my own downloadable um, uh, website
Platform?
where I
Oh.
platform my whole platform, and it was very expensive. And I
Yeah.
did it. I kind of had to do it. I think all of the independent promoters at that time were
Yeah.
having to do that, but it wasn't easy. It was very, very complicated. And
Well, if
yeah,
if I go back to the 90s, which is my era in the music business, and that's when I seen the success in my label and others, I seen it, and I followed a lot of people, a lot of, a lot of, I would say strictly rhythm. I follow a lot of Mark Finkelstein footsteps, I would say. Um, take me through this. And so the million now, everybody want their records to be on the charts, obviously, on the Billboard charts. Okay. Lauren was the guy for all the independent labels, every label I knew in New York City. Then you got, I think, if you don't mind, I'll mention some of the other names. You got Brad LeBeau, you got Bobby Shaw, you had Sin, and I think there was another guy who used to work for Strictly. I forgot his name, tall guy, really forgot his name. And there was other also house guys, like, hey, I do promotion also. So, and there's only 70 songs that you're able to enter. How did all of you fought for the spots, and everybody wanted to be top 5 or top 10 or number 1? And you had how many records at a time you worked? Just you alone. Forget about all the names I mentioned.
well, I would
These are
work.
household names, even not to mention
Yeah,
the small guys. But how
yeah.
many you worked at a time, and how did you manage to prioritize records after records after record? I mean,
Yeah. Well,
It's like an ending feeding machine.
yeah, well, that's exactly what it was. And you know, people ask me, what was it like having my own business or even promoting records? When you're promoting 12 or 15 records at a time, which was about my threshold, for me to
Yeah.
take on any more than that was just it's just impossible. And then if you
15
think
records
about
at a
it,
time you used to
yeah,
do.
yeah, and then these records would almost fall into a landing pattern on the charts. I mean, they weren't all
Yeah.
being released at the same time. Every week there'd be
Yeah.
new records, or sometimes there'd be a gap of a couple of weeks between records. So that would give some breathing room to be able to promote them and to start going for ads and support onto the Billboard charts. But it
Yeah.
was, you know, people ask me, how did you do your work? And I said, well, I got it done somehow, but it was working basically 7 days a week from 8 in the morning till midnight every single day for 36 years. I mean, it was
Wow.
a lot of work. It wasn't easy. You know, everybody thinks it's so glamorous, and it is. I mean, you're making these records look good, but there's so much sweat and work that goes
7 days.
into.
You were
I
doing
was
it
working
7
7
days.
days a week. Some DJs would
Wow.
say, "I'm too busy during the week. Call me on a Saturday." And if they said call me on a Saturday, I'd call them on a Saturday. Didn't matter. I wanted to get
How,
my records out there.
and how many Billboard reporters were 200, 250?
No. There weren't that many. I think at the peak, oh boy, it's hard to remember. I think at the peak there were about 150, 160 DJs, and it was almost preferable to have that many. There were some times when the DJ panel got down to only 90 or 100, and there weren't enough voices out there. So I almost preferred it when there were 160. Yeah, it meant more work for me, but I was able to talk to more people about music and get records going.
But still, these guys were pounded by you. I mean, in a positive way, what I meant, and by everybody else calling him as, hey, push that record, work that record. The other
Right.
promoters, and they had
Yeah.
also probably 10, 5, or 15 labels they were working
You
with
know,
every month.
the competition was very, very stiff. I
Yeah.
had to very often um, pick and choose records that I would promote. I didn't take on every record that came my way. I couldn't. I
Yeah.
didn't want to work 30 records, and there were some people that tried to do it, but it's just brutal. So
Did
I would say no. I would say no to some record labels if they came to me thinking, you know, do you feel this record has chart potential? Number one, do you think it has top
uh
20 potential or top 10? And I would say, you know, I just don't hear it. So I would pass, and that was fine. And there was always another project out there to work on, you know.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, and this is, I think, part of working as an independent. I was able to pick and choose and make it work the way I wanted it to work.
Did you also work the sales chart right across from it,
No, no,
or only the
no.
club play?
Only the
Only the
club
club play.
play. So basically, with the club play, you know, promotion is really a business of relationships,
Yeah.
and the idea for people ask me all the time, or had asked me, how do you get these records going? I would get to know these DJs, no matter who they were. And I would travel as much as I can around the country to go visit them in their clubs so I could actually
I used to
hear what they were
travel.
playing. I used to travel,
Uh-huh.
not a lot, because then it would
Yeah.
take me away from being on the phone. You know, there weren't
Yes.
cell phones like there are now. So for me to
Yes.
go away was, well, okay, if I go away, what do? Sit in a hotel? I don't want to do that. I want to go out and visit the DJs and see the clubs.
Yes.
So I kind of shied away from traveling.
Doing that.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I was more comfortable being home, getting the job done to the best of my ability. And I also would tell the labels, look, I feel that your record has top 25 capability, or top 15, or top 10. Or if I
What
really
was
felt,
the durations like? What's the life of the record? Like 4 weeks,
okay,
6 weeks,
yeah,
8
no,
weeks
the life of promoting a record
on the
was
charts.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
the charts from beginning to end. From by the time you mail it, put it in the mail, and get it peaked out on the chart was about 12 to 14 weeks, I would say. So you were
12 to
working
14.
any given record for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now there were, and this is another question that I get asked all the time. There were some tools that I had to work with, and probably the most important one was the remix. And I know that's probably to the bane of so many record labels, because then they figured, oh boy, now we have to start spending more money on a record to promote it by having it remixed and remixed and remixed again. But it
During the
was
promotion period. During
during
the
the
promotion
promotion,
period.
and
To
sometimes
elevate it to a higher chart number.
exactly, sometimes we would be
Yes.
at number 8 on the chart. And the record labels would be like, all right, we'd like to try and get this to number 1. What can we do? And I guess the easy answer was, well, we got to go in there. We got to get remixes by this one, and this one. Of course, the bigger the names,
Whoever's
the bigger
hot on the
whoever's
charts.
hot,
Yes.
right? Whoever's the bigger names, it all helps. But then the record labels would have to foot the bill. And hopefully it worked. Very often it did. Very often that extra remix or two was able to help put a record over the top and be able to make it reach the goal that we were looking for.
Wasn't that the key? Wasn't that the key to whoever got their records up to top 5 or number 1? They all of a sudden they get licensing, exclusive and non-exclusive worldwide. They start making money from that because of the notoriety that the record is already reached number 1. So wasn't that the main key? That's what their goal, correct?
Yeah, the goal is to try and get those records up onto the chart as high as you can.
So
now,
they can get licensed.
I did want to mention one other thing about remixes.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s, we didn't have the remixes like we did in the 90s and the 2000s. When Donna Summer's MacArthur Park came out, there was one mix, and that was it. Now, these records were just probably the most unbelievable dance records ever created.
Yes, that's it.
So
that's
many,
one,
they
and
were
that's
just
it.
so
Yes.
fantastic. But then
They had a club version and a radio version. That's it.
Club version and radio version, and that you're right.
Yes.
That was it. But then by the 2000s, it wasn't uncommon to have 6 remixes, 8 remixes. Or a DJ would say, I need a remix that sounds a certain way. I need it to be more edgy or more EDM. So it's like, all right, so we would try and satisfy people as much as we can and provide those remixes where we could. But
what's the most, how many vinyls of one record, one song that you've seen because of the remixes? Like how many different vinyls, the most you've seen?
I think by that time, everything was digital. So it was a matter of just me uploading those records onto my website. But sometimes in any one given record, like Umbrella by Rihanna, there'd be 12 different mixes by the time we finished promoting that record.
Wow.
But it went to number 1. In fact, Rihanna, I believe, was probably one of the biggest artists that I've ever had regarding number 1s. I think we had 42 number 1s with Rihanna. Wow. Every record hit number 1. Everything. So
unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I'm very proud of that because I did all of that myself, but it was a lot of work, but a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I'm sure. Loren, I mean, you work with indie labels and major. So what do you think is the advantages and disadvantages of working with an indie and a major? I could maybe say one thing. Indies always want to chisel you down, negotiate the price. Majors always pay whatever the bill is.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't always the case. I think that the biggest difficulty with working with the independent labels was certainly for me at the very beginning in the 1980s. A lot of DJs, it's not that they didn't want to play those records, but because of the clubs that a lot of them were in, they had to play Michael Jackson, and they had to play Madonna, and they had to play Prince, and they had to play everything that was on the radio. So for us to come along with an independent label record and try and make something of it wasn't very easy. So we got as far as we could. I'll tell you, there were some record labels that were very happy to have a top 30 hit on the Billboard Club chart at that point.
Yeah.
That's how stiff the competition was coming from the major record labels.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, no, please go ahead. You always have interesting things to say.
It was, it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed what I was doing. There's
36 years, 7 days a week.
It was a total of 43 years professionally in the music business.
I'm gonna knock on the wood here.
Yeah,
you need an award, buddy. You need an award for promotion.
36 years on my own, but
wow.
There was one regret that I always had, and this is in retrospect now. I never had my own record label. And I think that's something that I think I would have had a lot of fun doing. I had
and probably a lot of success.
I hope so. I think so. I had access to music that was coming from Europe. There was tons of records that were coming from Europe and artists that wanted to be represented here in the United States, especially on the Billboard chart. It was that so important to them. And I saw a lot of really, really good records that never saw the light of day here, which is unfortunate.
Wow.
But I thought about it, and in the 90s, I figured, why don't I start my own label? But I felt that if I did, I would be only focusing on my record label, and then all the promotion of the other artists would fall by the wayside, which I just didn't feel comfortable with. So I decided it's all right. It's all right. I'm a part of these records, whether they belong to me or not. So
if you had a chance to do it again, would you do it the same way, or you would start a label? If you had a chance to do it all over again.
Well, I think I needed the experience first. So I had to have the promotion background to be able to get to that point where I figured, hey, let me start a label. So it's not like I would have started off in 1984. Oh, I'll just start a label.
No,
I didn't have I didn't have $1 million sitting in my pocket because it costs so much. And then you're worried about or concerned about manufacturing, distribution, artwork,
warehousing,
management, royalties,
shipping, all of that.
And it became so complicated. I figured, this is not going to be worth it. So I stuck to promotion. And I think I excelled at it, and I had a lot of fun with it, and that was it. So it's all good.
I mean, you've experienced the evolution from nightlife and iconic clubs, Studio 54, and the many you mentioned, to digital platforms. In your view, has the role of a DJ and clubs breaking new music? Because, back in the day, who broke the records beside the DJ? And if you have something commercially, it went from there to the radio. How do you think this whole thing transformed throughout the years?
Well, I think that DJs were in a particularly good situation, and I would say most of them were. Where they were able to try out new music on their audiences. Where, I mentioned before that there were some clubs that had to play the hits. It was only going to be Madonna and Michael Jackson all night long. If it had to be that way, so be it. But there were just as many clubs, I think, at that time that were able to try new music. And that's how I think the evolution of dance music through the DJs came to be. And I embrace that because a lot of the records that I did promote were not household names or artists that were not household names. These weren't records that started at the radio and then worked their way down. They were going to be underground or club records that only were able to work their way up. So
because quite a few records that you worked into the charts, they became, big commercial hits, not just domestically, or nationally, internationally. You know, I
There were
remember.
a lot. There were a lot. When
Yeah.
I worked with Star 69 and Peter Rauhoff.
Oh, I forgot about that. Star
Yeah,
69. Yes.
yeah.
Oh my God. Yes.
They
Yes.
had some club records that really translated to become pop hits later on. Now, some of them,
Yes.
it may have taken years. I remember, what was the,
You worked Eric Morella's record, I
I,
Like to Move It. You worked that record. I Like
yes,
to Move It.
yes.
Yes.
I worked
It
that record,
became
and
a household song worldwide
well, hey,
in
listen,
commercials and movies.
yeah, it's on
Yeah.
TV right now. It's a cereal commercial or whatever it is.
Yes.
After what, 25 or 30 years, you hear it every
Uh,
minute, all day long on television.
yes. Yes.
So that,
Yes.
those are records that really translated and
Did
became
you
part of
also work
pop culture.
Levels? Avicii, you work Levels at Avicii, the first
Yeah,
record, the biggest hit he
yeah,
has.
yeah,
Wow. And that's
yeah,
also another one that became a household,
yeah.
song worldwide, commercials and movies and whatever and everything.
There was who else did I work with? That was a lot of fun. Bob Sinclair was
Bob
signed
Sinclair,
to, I
yes, yes.
believe he was with the Tommy Boy um,
Yeah.
label group for quite a while, and I got to meet him, and he was a really nice guy, Bob Sinclair, and he had some real groundbreaking records that were
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah.
So
I
yeah,
remember. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Amazing, Lauren. Really. Um, what is the challenges throughout your career? I mean, that's a long, extensive, fun, interesting journey you had in the music industry. What is the challenges and the setbacks that if you could share with us some that you came across and you faced in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I think the biggest setbacks, and we had mentioned this earlier in the conversation,
Yes.
were when
Yeah.
I lost those major label
Your
jobs
job in
at
Colombia. Yeah.
Columbia. It was
Yeah.
really very heartbreaking for me because I loved it, and I was really beginning to grasp it. Um, and but I got past it. I knew that I wanted to stay in the music business, and
Hmm.
it meant a lot to me. I had already some very good, solid relationships with not only record labels but DJs around the world. So I figured, you know
Yeah.
what, let me stay in it. So that was the impetus for me to stay in there and keep working rather than give it up. But
So you
you know, at
stayed
the
at it.
same time, I was having fun. It was a lot
Hmm.
of fun to do. It was a lot of sweat and blood, sweat, and tears, but it
Yes.
was a lot of fun at the same time.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
working at home was great because I had everything that I needed. I had all my computers. I had everything right in front of me. For me to travel into Manhattan, which I didn't do, I
Yes.
currently live in Westchester County, New York, and I've been here for a long time, and still had my business when I was living here. I was able to, if I thought of something, at 6 o'clock in the morning, run to the computer and write myself a note, or make sure that I send out a remix to a DJ that's been asking me about something. So,
Hmm.
as difficult as working as an independent was, it was very
Yeah.
rewarding and a lot of
Hmm. Very interesting. Very inspiring,
fun.
I would say, also. Um, what's a common misconception, Lauren, that people have about the music industry?
I think people think that it's just all fun and games, and it's just very
Uh-huh.
easy, and it isn't. I mean, you
Yes.
really have to work. We talked just a little while ago about the competition and how many
Yes.
artists there are and how many labels there are internationally.
Yeah.
At any given moment, even now, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of new records coming out every single week. Um, it's not easy. You can't just sit by and say, "Oh well, this record is going to promote itself." Um, and I think people think that, oh well, this is a real cushy, luxurious job that somebody has, and it's easy, and that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case at all.
No.
So I think that's the biggest misconception that people might have about that is a real fallacy. Yeah.
I know we spoke about a lot of people that you worked with. It's one of the questions I had, but you probably answered about collaboration. And, it's a key element in our business. You work with a lot of anybody else that we haven't talked about it, like a memorable collaboration that you had with anybody
You
that
know,
left an impact on you.
yeah,
Yeah.
there were some people. I mean, there were many people throughout the years
Yeah.
that I forged good relationships with, and but there was one in particular that I felt was a real mentor for me, and I think he may have been so for a lot of people. Who was really loved at that time as a promoter in the music business. His name
Hmm.
was Jerry Lembo, and you know that name. And
Yes.
Jerry and I spoke an awful lot. Well, we worked also. He worked independently for Profile Records when I was working independently for Profile Records. But
Yeah.
at that time,
Yeah.
he and I were able to converse a lot and talk about things. And he told me about what his experiences, good and bad, were. And I think he really helped me and led the way and was able to honestly answer some questions for me about what it was going to be like to fully be involved in the music business. So that's one name I think after all these years, 40 years,
Hmm.
that has really stuck out in my mind. And
Jerry Lembo.
really Jerry Lembo. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was great.
Yeah.
There was, we talked a little bit about Profile Records. Corey Robbins too was just terrific. He and I worked.
Yes.
It wasn't. I don't think it was just a client independent promoter situation. We worked
Hmm.
together. I mean, we would go to the offices after the end of the day and talk about strategy. And for me, that was important. It was almost as if um, he made me feel like I was a part of the company. Although I was an independent, I was there to help make decisions and really discuss strategy and plans. Hey, listen, uh, when I worked for Profile, there was one
Yeah.
artist that I recommended that he sign, and
Wow.
it was
To
Paul
Corey.
Hardcastle to Corey, and it
Uh-huh.
was Paul
Wow.
Hardcastle. And I
Wow.
said, Paul Hardcastle's making a big impact in the clubs right now with his song Rainforest, and later on with the song 19, which was a big commercial radio hit.
Yeah.
But I don't think that would have happened unless I had that kind of relationship with Corey,
Hmm.
and that was very
Wow.
special. John Luongo
He's
was
still
great.
around. Corey's
Yeah,
still around.
yeah,
Corey.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
not in
still
touch
at
with
it.
him too much anymore. A lot of these
Yeah.
people I'm not in touch with anymore. But they have made such an impact that they're part of my memory now, and it's a good one.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow. Interesting.
yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Technology obviously it changed significantly and changed the music industry landscape, I would say. How have advancement in technology influenced your work in the music industry as a whole? You know,
Well, I
like it went
think
from cassette, vinyl, CD, digital.
yeah, I think that's it. That was the biggest notable part of it was making those transitions.
Yeah.
Especially when we went from vinyl to digital, I was not happy about that. I mean, I've
Uh-huh.
always been a vinyl person, and there were a lot of DJs who didn't fully embrace that too, because it was almost like there was more work for them. They would then have to go to these websites and start downloading, listening to remixes, trying to figure out what they were going to play, rather than get a 12-inch single that had maybe two or three mixes on it.
Hmm.
So that was probably one of the most challenging technological advances that I
Hmm.
remember having to work with. But we did it, and now it's just par for the course. It also killed the music business, I think.
How?
Well, once records were available digitally on the internet, anybody
Uh,
could get them for free, and the record
Back in the
labels
day, yes.
back in the day in the
Yes.
early 2000s, the record sales just tanked, completely tanked.
I remember.
There was, yeah,
Yes.
people were just going on, I can't even remember what the websites were at the time, but they could get these records for free. So, hey, listen,
Yes.
if you don't have to spend $8 on buying a vinyl 12-inch, and you can get it for
Napster
free.
and many others used to get it for
Napster,
free.
that
Yeah.
was the one that I was trying to
Yeah.
think of. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we dealt with
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
though. I mean, it was just part of the business. It was evolving. And again,
And
it's
as you
funny
know,
how
go
we're
ahead.
back
Go
into
ahead.
vinyl again. You know, everybody loves
Yes,
vinyl again.
but you know the industry is changing now too because we getting into a new era of AI now, and that's gonna change, transfer the whole business as we know it, as we learn how to know it, which is the digital age. It's gonna change now. You know
I'm
it.
sure it will. I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a part of that anymore. So we'll see. We'll see.
You only
Um,
consult, give advices now.
yeah,
That's it.
you know what's interesting.
Yeah.
I have always said you may be able to take the man out of the music business, but you can't take the music business out of the man.
Out of the
Even
man.
though I'm not
Yes.
actively doing promotion anymore, I've moved on
You
to other
still
things.
read and see and
I listen
follow.
to every record that's out there, and when I go to the gym, let's say if there's a record playing that I'm not familiar with, I make it to that television screen to see who the artist is.
Do you get records by? I know nobody mails you, but do you get like links of emails of new records, new artists, whether independent or major or
Now,
not
no,
anymore? You don't.
not anymore.
No.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
I'm apart from the music business now completely. So, but like I
Listen,
said,
you
I
must.
still listen. You know, that's never gonna go away.
Yes.
Um,
You must have one of the biggest vinyl collection. I don't know if you do, or did you sell it, or you still have, or no?
I think the peak of my record collection was when I was still living in Manhattan.
Uh huh.
And at that point, I had about 14,000 records, all vinyl. And that's not
You
even
need
a
a
big
warehouse for
collection.
that.
That wasn't a big collection. That wasn't a big collection. There were some people that had a
Wow.
lot more than that. But my apartment, and it was a small apartment in New York City, was wall to wall DJ equipment and records and records and
Crates,
records.
milk crates.
And maybe a little bit of food in the refrigerator, but that was about it.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
but and now I think I've sold a lot of records. I have maybe about 4,000 left, and these are collector's items, things that I really love. Um,
Hmm.
I have some special import copies of especially some of the rock music that I listen. Some of the Roxy Music albums that I have that are pressed in Japan, and some of the Deep Purple records that I have that were pressed in Italy, and so these records
Hmm.
just sound so good. And
You know,
those are part of my personal collection now. And
I
again, a
was going to
lot of the
ask
12
you.
inches.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah,
It's funny. I haven't heard that word import for a long time.
yeah,
We used to use it in the record. Oh, that's an import. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Now I guess everything's
you
imported.
know, yes, everything is an import. What is, I mean, how, I was going to ask you, how do you keep yourself updated and, in the latest trends? But it came to you. You used to get records every day,
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
back, you didn't have to look for it. Like now, if somebody say, how do you stay updated? Oh, I'm on social media. I'm always listening. I'm always looking, you know.
Well, a lot of it too was, and this is a very, very important to being a promotion person,
Yes.
is
Yeah.
not only being able to tell a story, and I guess to have the gift of gab, which I used to have. I don't know if I have it as much anymore, but listening to DJs is important too. And this was part of the enjoyment of being in the music business, was getting DJs on the phone, and then after we went through the whatever records I was promoting, I would say,
Yeah.
what records do you like? And not what the other not what the other promoters are promoting. What records from Europe are you listening to right
Yeah.
now?
Yes. You're
And that
listening
was a
to,
big
yes.
part of finding out, what was out there. And if I was on the phone with a DJ, as soon as I
Yeah.
hung up with him, within 2 minutes, I would be on the computer trying to find the record that they were just talking to me about to
Wow.
listen to.
Interesting.
But that's just part of it. I mean, if you're going to be in this business, you have to be completely
Yes.
submerged, and you have to be in it
Yes.
and understand it, and not just
Correct.
at 5 o'clock say, okay, the day's over.
No,
You have to
no.
be
The
in it all
music
the time.
business never. To
It
me,
never
it
stops.
never. It had no time. It never stops. And there was no 9 to 5, and there's no time for it. Never.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
how do you, if for our listeners who's going to be watching, who's going to be inspired by your story and by what you've done in throughout your journey in the music industry, any advice to them? What's your
Well,
advice for the newer generation who wants to do what you did, or
well,
or
I would,
maybe carve their own path in the industry?
yeah, I would say anyone who's really interested in being in the music business has got to learn how to fully persevere what they're doing, because it isn't easy. Breaking in is not easy.
Hmm.
I mean, when we started our conversation a little while ago, I was very, very fortunate to get that phone call from somebody to say, hey, would you like to work at Columbia Records? And again, not knowing what they were talking about, I said, sure. I didn't know, but I learned.
I'll
I
take
had
the
to learn
job.
very, very quickly. But now that
Yes.
that's very unusual, and that doesn't happen very, very often, I don't think.
Yeah.
But anyone who wants to get there are possibilities, and there are jobs out there. But I think people have to find their niche. Are they
Yes.
interested in working in a recording studio? Or are they interested in representing artists or being a manager? And I think the best way for them to get going is to just work with an artist, learn the
Yeah.
ropes, figure out what's involved, learn how to shake hands, learn how to talk to people, and all of that. I mean, that's just the way you have to do it. And I think that's
Yes.
probably the same in a lot of businesses. If you go to
Yeah.
school to be a doctor, you know what the outcome is going to be. You're going to be a doctor. But in the music business, there are dozens of different facets and different areas within the music business that you can follow.
Correct.
Find something that you're interested in and go for it. And it'll happen. Just don't try and make it happen quickly. That's the only
Yes.
thing that I can say.
No shortcuts. No shortcuts. There's steps to everything. Before we wrap it up, I know you're out of the business and you something that you've done to put it behind you. You've done it well. Um, if there's anything that you want to share before we wrap this wonderful interview with you, with Loren, and I enjoyed it so much because I knew you really personally for many years. Anything that you're working on or nothing? But I don't know. I'm not trying to drag you into the music business again.
Yeah, yeah. And
We're gonna sound
you
like the
know,
movie The Godfather. Every time I
I
pull
mean,
out, they pull me back in.
I think at this point now, I had such a memorable experience and such a good experience,
Yeah.
because there were so many great
Yes.
people to work with, and that's important.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try and make lightning strike twice. I mean, it was what it
Yeah.
is. I think just maybe I am. Maybe I'm not too old to be in the music business anymore. I don't know about that. But it's
No,
just
ages.
I feel like I've moved on now. In fact, what I'm doing now is I'm working for a nonprofit here in Westchester County, and helping to run a museum, and it's another whole story. And
It's
maybe
okay.
someday we'll be able to talk about that. But
Yes.
I've moved on
Yes.
to other things. But I would end with saying that there are some real good possibilities. And what I would like to see is the next huge record producer emerge from the dance music field. Right now, there is a lot of mediocre music out there, I think. I'm not happy with a lot of the
Hmm.
music that I hear, but there's got to be
Hmm.
somebody out there with a lot of great talent, and that person will come along someday. And I look forward to listening with open ears when that day comes.
I'm
And I'm
sure it
sure
will. I'm
I'm
sure it
sure there'll
will.
be
Every
somebody.
decade, yeah, there's somebody. Like decade of Avicii and Guetta, and how Swedish the whole that became theirs. That whole period.
Yeah,
They
and
owned it.
I think we're still in that period, to tell you the truth,
Hmm.
because a lot of
Hmm.
those artists are still DJing worldwide, and
Hmm.
they're still out there. But I'm talking years from now, 5 years, 8 years from now. there's going to be somebody else out there.
I'm sure. I'm 100% sure.
And, who's going to be the next Giorgio Moroder? That's the quality that I'm looking for. Well, who's going to be the next Gino Socio? Somebody that's, a genius record promoter, or a Mark Cerrone, or, somebody like that. There'll be somebody someday, I hope.
Yes, I'm 100%.
And I'll be there listening.
Yes. Sadly, all great things has to come to an end. Thank you for joining us today, Loren. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed it very much, the conversation, the whole interview, and brought me back a lot of great memories back in the day in the music business.
And for me
this
too.
conclude today's This will conclude our today's episode of Soundbreaker. Please make sure to follow us on social media and stay tuned for new episodes. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Loren.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This podcast is presented by Music Dash, world's first AI-powered independent distribution CMS. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the Soundbreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.